Long ago, in a kingdom where pride ruled hearts and fear guided hands, a queen gave birth to a child who would bridge the worlds of land and sea. By the peaceful river's edge, where gentle waters whispered ancient secrets, Queen Aishi found herself alone on a fateful day that would change the course of two kingdoms. Her favorite sanctuary, where she had spent countless hours in quiet contemplation, was about to become the stage for both a miracle and a tragedy. The queen's time had come unexpectedly. As labor pains gripped her body with increasing intensity, her cries echoed across the empty riverbank. There was no one to hear her, no one to help. Fear mingled with determination as she realized she would have to face this moment alone, far from the palace's comforts and its skilled midwives. Hours passed like eternities as Queen Aishi struggled through her labor, the river's steady flow her only companion. When finally her child emerged into the world, her relief quickly turned to shock. The baby she held in her trembling hands was unlike anything she had expected, skin as white as freshly fallen snow, glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. Terror seized her heart as she stared at her newborn. Both she and King Yu were dark-skinned, as were all their people. The king, known throughout the land for his fierce pride and quick temper, would never believe this child was his. Queen Aishi knew her husband well enough to understand that his rage would be devastating. He would assume she had been unfaithful, and in his kingdom such a betrayal meant death. Tears streaming down her face, Queen Aishi made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. With shaking hands and a breaking heart, she wrapped her baby in soft cloth, and, whispering words of desperate apology, placed him in the river's gentle current. She watched, her soul shattering, as the waters carried away her child, his faint cries fading into the distance. But Queen Aichi knew she couldn't return to the palace empty-handed. With her legs still weak and her heart heavy with grief, she made her way to the kingdom's furthest corner, where an old orphanage stood in shadows. There, with promises of gold and secrets, she found what she needed: a dark-skinned baby boy, perfect in every way that would please the king. When she returned to the palace, no one questioned the legitimacy of her child. The kingdom celebrated the birth of Prince Arenz, and King Yu beamed with pride at his apparent son. The people sang songs of joy, and festivities lasted for days. Yet behind her forced smiles and gracious nods, Queen Aichi carried a burden that would grow heavier with each passing year. Every night, as she lay in her royal chambers, the queen's thoughts returned to the river, to the child she had given away. She wondered if he had survived, if someone had found him, if someone had found him, if somewhere in the world her white-skinned baby still lived. Little did she know that her decision that day had set in motion events that would eventually bridge two worlds and transform a kingdom. In the depths of the shimmering river, where sunlight danced through crystal-clear waters, Queen Mary glided gracefully through her underwater realm. As ruler of the mermaids, she often patrolled the boundaries between the water world and the realm of humans above. On this day, a sound unlike any other caught her attention: the desperate cries of a baby drifting on the surface. With a powerful sweep of her iridescent tail, Queen Mary surged upward. There, floating precariously on the gentle current, she found a tiny infant wrapped in cloth, his skin as white as pearls. The baby's cries grew weaker as water began to claim him, his small arms flailing against the inevitable pull of the river. Without hesitation, Queen Mary gathered the child in her arms, but immediately faced a dire challenge. As she submerged with her precious cargo, the baby began to choke, his tiny face turning pale as he struggled for air. Acting on ancient instinct, Queen Mary pressed a gentle kiss to the infant's forehead. Magic sparkled between them like scattered starlight, and before her eyes the baby's legs shimmered and merged into a beautiful silver tail. "Welcome to your new home," Prince Kala, Queen Mary whispered, naming him for his unique brilliance that seemed to call forth the light itself. The baby, now breathing easily in his transformed state, cooed softly and reached for her with tiny hands. Princess Deka, Queen Mary's daughter, was enchanted by her new brother from the moment she saw him. She spent countless hours teaching him the ways of their underwater world, how to swim with the swift currents, how to speak with sea creatures, and how to find the most beautiful shells hidden in the coral reefs. Their laughter echoed through the crystalline passages of the palace, a duet of joy that brought smiles to all who heard it. As Kala grew, something extraordinary began to happen in the Mermaid Kingdom. The coral reefs, which had been slowly fading over the years, suddenly burst with vibrant colors, schools of fish returned to their ancient breeding grounds in unprecedented numbers. Even the water itself seemed to sparkle with renewed vitality, as if Kalao's presence awakened some long-dormant magic in the depths. The young prince grew into a warrior of exceptional skill, his movements through water as precise as a dolphin's and as powerful as a whale's. The mer people watched in awe as he mastered their ancient fighting arts with unprecedented speed, his white skin glowing like a beacon as he trained. Yet despite his growing strength, Kalao remained gentle and kind, beloved by all in the kingdom. Queen Mary looked upon her adopted son with pride, knowing that fate had brought him to her for a reason. Though she couldn't have known it then, this child who bridged two worlds would one day bring about changes that would reshape both realms forever. For now, though, he was simply her beloved son, a bright light in the depths of her underwater kingdom. In the depths of the royal library, where ancient scrolls held the kingdom's most sacred secrets, King Wu sat hunched over weathered parchments, his brow furrowed in concentration. For weeks, something had troubled his sleep, a nagging feeling that he had missed something vital to his reign. As he unrolled yet another ancient text, his eyes widened at what he discovered. There, written in fading ink, was a prophecy that shook him to his core. Every 2 centuries, a child of pure white skin would be born into the royal line, bringing unprecedented power and prosperity to the kingdom. The last such child had appeared exactly 200 years ago, which meant another should have been born during his reign. Troubled by this revelation, King Wu summoned the chief priest, a wise elder respected throughout the land. The priest arrived in his ceremonial robes, his weathered face calm, but his eyes holding ancient wisdom. In the flickering torchlight of the royal chamber, he burned sacred herbs and began to chant, his deep voice echoing off the stone walls as he communed with the gods. When the priest opened his eyes, his words fell like stones into still water. The child has been born, Your Majesty. The gods speak clearly. The Blessed One left the king's face darkened with rage and confusion. How can this be? He demanded. I have seen no such child in my kingdom. His suspicion growing like a shadow at sunset, King Wu summoned Queen Aishi to his chambers. She entered with trembling steps, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The king's questioning began gently but grew increasingly harsh as he detected the fear in her responses. Under the weight of his fierce gaze and mounting anger, Queen Aishi finally broke. Through tears and sobs, she confessed everything: the solitary birth by the river, the baby's startling appearance, her desperate decision to abandon him, and the deception with the orphan child. Each word seemed to fuel the king's rage until it blazed like an inferno. You abandoned the blessed child, he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the palace. You threw away the god's gift to our kingdom. Without hesitation, he ordered both Queen Aishi and Prince Arenz, the child who had lived a lie for 15 years, to be imprisoned in the palace dungeons. But it was the chief priest's next revelation that truly set the king's heart ablaze with fury. Through his divine connection, he sensed that the child had not perished in the river that day. Instead, he had been taken in by the mer people, raised as one of their own beneath the waves. King Wu's hands clenched into fists as he processed this information. His sacred heir, the promised child of prophecy, was being kept from him by creatures of the deep. As the sun set on this day of revelations, his mind was already turning to thoughts of war, his pride demanding the return of what he saw as rightfully his. The sealed glass bottle bobbed gently in the river's current, carrying within it a message that would ignite a war between two realms. King Wu's demands were as cold as they were clear: return my son within 3 days, or face my wrath. When Queen Mary read these words in her underwater palace, her anger rippled through the water like a sudden current. She tore the letter in two, watching the pieces drift away like fallen leaves. But Prince Kalao had witnessed everything, and for the first time learned the truth of his origins. Yet instead of feeling drawn to his birth father, he felt only disappointment at the king's arrogant words. This is my home, he declared to Queen Mary, and you are my true mother. As the third day dawned, tension hung heavy in the air like storm clouds before a tempest. King Wu arrived at the riverbank in gleaming armor, his army assembled behind him with weapons drawn. The water stirred and parted as Queen Mary emerged, her form shifting from mermaid to human as she stepped onto land, her own warriors ready beneath the waves. This is your last chance, King Wu's voice boomed across the water. Return, my son, or I will destroy everything you hold dear. Queen Mary stood tall, her voice steady as the river itself. You speak of a son you abandoned, she replied. We saved him, raised him, loved him. Your demands mean nothing here. The battle that followed was like nothing the kingdom had ever seen. Queen Mary and King U clashed in personal combat, their swords singing through the air. At first, the queen's swift movements and graceful strikes pushed the king back, her blade dancing like light on water. But King U, his pride wounded and his anger burning, reached for darker powers. Drawing a red cloth from his armor, he bound it to his arm and began to chant ancient, forbidden words. Darkness swirled around him like a malevolent tide, and his strength grew tenfold. Queen Mary found herself retreating before his enhanced fury, blood flowing from a wound on her arm. The king pressed his advantage, his sword raised for a killing blow, when suddenly a light brighter than the sun itself burst from the river. A voice that seemed to shake the very earth commanded, "Stop." Prince Kallo emerged from the water, his white skin glowing with an otherworldly power. As he stepped onto land, his mermaid tail transformed into legs, but the aura of power around him only grew stronger. Both armies stood transfixed as he walked between the combatants, his presence halting the battle as surely as if time itself had stopped. Your pride blinds you, Kallo addressed King U, his voice carrying the wisdom of both land and sea. A true father would not demand with threats, but ask with love. A true king would not wage war over pride, but seek peace through understanding. His words fell like stones into still water, and even the mighty King Wu found himself unable to raise his sword against such truth. In the silence that followed Prince Kallo's intervention, a profound transformation began to unfold. Standing before his birth father, Kallo's white skin glowed with an inner light that seemed to illuminate not just the battlefield, but the darkness within King Wu's heart. 3 simple words Kallo spoke, his voice gentle yet powerful, could have prevented all of this bloodshed. Please, thank you, and I'm sorry. The king's soldiers, who had lived for years under his harsh rule, looked upon Kallo and saw the leader they had always yearned for. One by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped away from their king, moving to stand behind the radiant prince. This silent rebellion spoke louder than any battle cry, showing King Uyu that true loyalty couldn't be commanded through fear. For the first time in his life, King U felt the weight of his pride crushing him. Standing alone, abandoned by his army, and confronted by his own son's wisdom, he finally understood the cost of his arrogance. In that moment, his armor seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and he fell to his knees. I am sorry, he whispered, the words strange and unfamiliar on his tongue. But as he spoke them, something shifted inside him, a lifetime of rigid pride cracking like ice in spring. Queen Mary, seeing the genuine transformation in his eyes, extended her hand in peace. The dungeons were opened, and Queen Aishi emerged with Prince Erenz, blinking in the sunlight of a new day. When she saw Kallo, she too fell to her knees, but he lifted her gently. Mother, he said, embracing her, fear made you act, but love has brought us back together. In the days that followed, both kingdoms flourished in their newfound peace. King U, transformed by humility, shaved his head as a symbol of his rebirth and began to rule with compassion. The palace, once a place of fear, filled with laughter and music. Prince Erenz remained as part of the family, becoming a bridge between the royal lineage and the common people. Kallo moved freely between both worlds, at home in the palace halls and the ocean depths. His presence brought prosperity to both realms, and the border between land and sea became a place of celebration rather than division. When King U grew on past the crown to Kallo, his first act was to ban the use of dark magic forever, ensuring that power would come from wisdom and kindness rather than fear and corruption. The story of the white-skinned prince who united 2 kingdoms became a legend told around fires and in the depths of the sea. Parents taught their children the power of humility through King U's transformation, and lovers learned that even the deepest wounds could be healed by sincere words of remorse. Years later, when people spoke of this tale, they would say that the greatest magic wasn't in Prince Kallo's glowing skin or Queen Mary's transformative kiss, it was in the simple power of forgiveness and in the courage to speak 3 humble words that could change the world. Please, thank you, and I'm sorry.